Okay, so hello to you all, and thank you for attending this webinar. My name is Matt, I'm from BCP, so I'll be hosting the webinar for today. Before we go into the introductions of our four lovely guests we've got speaking today, I'm just going to explain how this session is going to work. So we'll spend the first 30 minutes where I'll ask questions to the four guests and they'll give their responses to those. But throughout that time, there is a Q&A section on your screen at the bottom of it, so you can ask a question that you'd like any of us to answer, which we'll do in the last part of this session. So the last 15 minutes will be a Q&A session. So I'll try my best to get through as many questions as I can in that time. If I can't cover them all, we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. If you direct it to a certain person, I'll try and approach those to get an answer to you. You'll notice on our backgrounds, we have our email addresses. So if you do feel obliged, then obviously please contact who you'd like to speak to regarding that. Now, this webinar, as you know, is about warehouse automation for the Wholesale Success, which you should know about. Obviously, you've filled in the registration part. The reason why we've chosen this topic is if you've been to any warehouse-related trade shows recently, you'll notice like a sheer number of representatives for automation and robotics. Now, this is a growing part of the sector. There's a lot of developing, promoting, and providing a wide range of technologies and machines into warehouses to drive efficiency and productivity, depending on the size of the business. So there are different, there's a wide range of catalogue that people can choose from to help promote that. So with the four guests we've got, so they're going to give a background of what they believe are going to be the benefits within this. Some are using it already, some know people that are using it, and where they see the benefits and pros going forward, and obviously any challenges they might have seen before, or they might see people having to go over that change in process to something different. Okay, so I'm going to delighted to introduce you to these four guest speakers. They're all from the industry. We've got one representing a leading body in the warehouse industry, two people from a warehouse and operations background regarding technology space as well, and also somebody from the same company as myself, BCP, who provides a technology supplier into this industry as well to help our customers and more to achieve the success going forward with that. So firstly, I'll ask Claire to introduce herself.
Hi, thank you, Matt, and thanks to everybody for dialing in. So I'm Clare Bottle, and I'm the Chief Executive of the UK Warehousing Association. Earlier in my career, I spent about 25 years working in operational logistics, and a few years ago, along with my friend Ruth Waring, I helped set up an informal networking group called Women in Logistics. But that's just a sort of hobby in my spare time, and my day job is running the UK Warehousing Association. We're the only trade body in the UK that's fully dedicated to warehousing. We're not really specialists in wholesale. Our warehouse members represent a really wide range of different sorts of operations. And we've got about 1,000 member companies all across the UK and Ireland. Okay, thank you, Claire. Just trying to find that spare time you got as well. And Andrew, please, if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Hello, all. So my name is Andrew Bushell, and I'm a Senior Systems Development Manager at James Hall & Co. And we are a food manufacturer, wholesaler and Spar retailer based in the north of England. Prior to this, I was at Ocado for 13 years, so working across various different warehouse automation roles, including solution design, implementation, and operational support, both here in the UK and overseas as well.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. John, please, from yourself.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you again for everybody for joining. My name's John Bovill. I'm the Chief Transformation and Technology Officer at Majestic Wine. Majestic Wine, we're the largest specialist wine, spirits and beer retailer in the UK. We operate approximately 210 stores. Our turnover is around about £400 million sterling. Background, I started my career at Harrods in supply chain, and since then I focused mainly in consumer brands. From an automation perspective and logistics operations perspective, that's mainly around buy and build strategies, driving out synergies and economies of scale. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. And Andy, please, from you.
Yes, hello everybody, and thanks for joining. So I'm Andy Pratt from BCP. And we're a specialist solutions provider in the primarily in the wholesale and distribution space. So we provide everything from ERP systems through to WMS systems for the marketplace. So we support quite a few warehousing operations. Personally, I know I don't look this old, but I've been in the industry for about 25 years. Everything from retail mail order through to B2B distribution, which is what I'm busying myself with at the moment.
Thank you, Andy. Brilliant. Okay, so I'll start with the first question. So let's hear some responses. So the first one's going to yourself, Claire. You deal with many organisations operating a range of sizes of warehouses. What is your experience with the shift for using automation within the warehouse from your members?
Yeah, it's a good question, Matt. Thank you. So I would say there's probably a range of different approaches that people take. And in order to illustrate that, I'm just going to share a couple of examples. So first of all, if you think about GXO, one of our UKWA members, they operate warehousing for Nestle in a purpose-built automated facility near East Midlands Airport at the SEGRO East Midlands Gateway development. That warehouse was built a couple of years ago, and it was really a sort of three-way partnership between GXO, who operate the warehouse, Nestle, who are their customer and the owner of the goods, and Swisslog, their automation partner. And they've been able to do that because all three have a long-term contractual relationship with each other. And so they sort of started from scratch with a purpose-built facility that's a global showcase for people in Nestle about how automation can really support warehousing operations specific to that client. They've installed loads of different types of automation, individual case picking, pallet building, layer picking, ASRS, a carousel system. I could go on, but the aim with all of that is really to explore what is the art of the possible. And that's, as I say, that's a sort of entirely automated system. At a different end of the scale, I would like to illustrate an example from Howard Tennants, who are another UKWA member. They've got a fairly old warehouse building in Ashby de la Zouch. I think it dates from around the 60s. And in that facility, they've partnered with Six River Systems and implemented some cobots to help with the picking activity for picking pet food. And, that's, as I say, a quite long-standing operation. And the example there is that they've retrofitted an element of automation into an existing operation without having to make significant changes either to the building or to the WMS that they're using. So I guess some of our members are not using any automation at all, but for those who are, those are the sort of different options that are open to them, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Claire. That just shows obviously the wide range of what can be used depending on the solution needed. Okay, so to Andrew, please. So what are your thoughts and how do you see the application of automation in the industry generally, and more specifically at James Hall?
Yeah, I think Matt, what I'll probably just do first is give a general view of probably the industry more from the kind of grocery retail space, and then kind of touch on how that's maybe shaped our objectives and some of the decisions that we've made at James Hall. I think firstly though, it's kind of clear to kind of recognise that the capabilities and the deployments of automation is kind of growing at a dramatic pace. I know you recently held a webinar on AI, and I think it's clear that the impact in the advancing technology and software is really enabling an increase in the use case of where automation can be applied in warehouses. That then in itself is being supported by an ever-growing vendor base who are disrupting the market. And then you've got the more traditional solution providers who are now starting to kind of expand their own ecosystem of applications. And I think it's also important to recognise the growth and the role of integrators too in the market. I think if you zoom in slightly and understand the drivers behind this, well, clearly on the demand side, kind of the economic factors are kind of well documented in terms of labour scarcity, wage rates. But I think where and what's probably more interesting from my point of view, where there's been a significant shift has been on the supply side, and that's been the advancement towards more standalone robotic applications that when you think of the degree of automation versus level of investment risk sort of scale, and this kind of aligns with what Claire was just discussing then, they're starting to really appeal to the businesses due to the fact that they're easy to implement, less costs, and they allow the customer to then scale in a more modular fashion. And I think it's been the adoption of these applications that's really seen sort of the drive in the growth. and it's allowing businesses like us at James Hall to deploy new solutions when in the past, we might not have been able to kind of validate the sort of the payback. And it's also where I think you'll see a lot more development efforts continue to be pointed towards as those solutions get a lot more refined. And what do I mean by sort of those solutions? Well, whether in the form of kind of cobots, kind of goods to man AMRs, vertical retrieval system, you've got stock counting drones. They're all starting to give the customer more flexibility in how they introduce automation into their operation and how best to handle their product range, their rates of sale, and the seasonality profile, rather than the sort of high investment, sort of high level of infrastructure automation systems that probably dominated the industry not so long ago. And I think now what you're seeing is a typical warehouse design that actually operates with multiple different solution types. And it's the combination of these goods to man systems, whether they're AMRs or kind of fixed mini loads, dense shuttle storage systems, alongside the traditional manual voice pick, that is allowing businesses to achieve further value, I think, through their fulfillment model. I think in the past, that level of integration would have probably been seen as too complex. Changes in technology, changes in software, it's probably now less of a barrier to entry as it once was. And I think then looking at us at James Hall, we're a good example of how that targeted shift from the supplier base has actually opened up new opportunities for our operation to be modernized. Just a context, so we're a regional single site manufacturing and distribution operation that runs 24/7. And what that means is that we have to really consider when looking at new applications is our business continuity and the level of investment around, the level of investment and the level of risk around the implementation. So for us, our strategy then, and I think like many businesses our size in the market, is to try and deploy solutions that are easily integratable with our current environment and probably crucially require minimal operational disruption, and then lends itself to be commercially flexible for our volume and any volume changes. And then that allows us in itself to sort of scale with confidence. I think taking that approach then has enabled us to narrow down our focus and enabled us to be diligent when it comes to our research. And then to give you an example of that, we've recently become the first UK-based customer to implement one of Solwar's grab robots, which combines a robotic picking arm with an automated vehicle. And these grab robots seamlessly integrate into existing layouts. For us, it was up and running within a few days, so extremely quick to implement. It took minimal warehouse reorganization. And then there's the added benefit that it can pick and pack for up to 18 hours a day, products that weigh up to 30 kilograms in weight. And as a standalone solution, it also meant that other aspects of our operation, we retain the opportunity to explore other solutions rather than maybe being committed to a one single system, which is quite rigid. So I think for me, in sort of summary, I think the recognition by suppliers over the last couple of years of their opportunity to probably resolve the challenge around providing more low entry, scalable robotic solutions that are fit for purpose has really been a positive for a business like ours. It's allowed us to then minimize some of the risk and deploy automation that best suits the different parts of our business.
Yeah, definitely. Cheers, Andrew. Yeah, key points there. Like trying to identify the right solution to fit the needs and without minimal disruption as well. The way forward, isn't it, really? And to John, please. So what are your thoughts regarding automation within the warehouse space from your past and current experiences?
Good, thank you, Matt. And firstly, just to build on the points that Claire and Andrew mentioned, I think the point around scarcity of resources is very well put by both Claire and Andrew. And I think inevitably all businesses need to understand what the response to that will be. And in reality, the response to that will be automation in some form. But clearly, it's got to be what's appropriate, fit for purpose for the business model, and clearly the outcomes the business wants to drive through, obviously, increasing growth and so on. So certainly the point on scarcity of resources is important. I think the second point that I'd just like to build upon is the lower barrier to entry, and they are getting lower. I think Andrew mentioned that a few times. That's the reality of it. So whereas it's prohibitive from a risk perspective, however you define risk in the past, that's really getting lower and lower and lower. And if I look specifically at the technology side, integration is never easy, and we've touched upon that. But equally, with the open APIs and APIs, etc., you got today, it makes it far easier than it once was. And certainly, when we're looking at cloud-based technologies, which increasingly most organisations have adopted or are adopting, means that they are scalable. So I think that's quite important factors now that make it a lot easier than it once was. I think the only point I'd like to add specifically, then I will come back to Majestic when I've finished on it, is one point we didn't touch upon, and it's very, very important, is climate change and sustainability. I think as we're looking forward, particularly for us, as we've got quite a diverse fleet and last mile, I think with reducing waste, which ultimately comes down to automation or productivity gains somewhere amongst the supply chain, whether it's been the inputs, the outputs, and so on, is very, very important. And it's a factor that probably isn't built in enough in our thinking. So it's certainly something that's important to us, particularly in the product that we deal with, which is an agricultural product in wine. So that certainly is a factor that we consider quite seriously as an organisation, and certainly our stakeholders do. With Majestic, if I just explain briefly about Majestic and how this manifests itself for us, is as an organisation, obviously we're specialists in our space. Our central distribution operation is effectively a cross-dock operation. It's run by ourselves, very, very efficient, very lean. The bulk of the automation in there is less about materials handling, it's more around voice. However, the complexity in our supply chain typically comes through the last mile, which is through our stores. I mentioned that earlier, it's 210 stores. And they effectively are mini fulfillment centres with quite a broad customer base, because it's not just walk-in customers, it's our e-commerce orders that we dispatch from those stores. We do click and collect from the stores, and we also fulfill our growing commercial B2B business. Yeah. Now, what does this mean from automation perspective? We've invested quite heavily in mobility. So within our distribution centre, it's all driven by voice predominantly. And within our stores, we invested quite heavily in handheld technologies within our stores. Where is that going? In last mile. So we have a white glove service with our customers. It's very important to our business. Our business is all about discovery, and that customer intimacy is really, really important to us, and that customer experience is very, very important to us. And certainly we're looking more and more and more in how we can be cleverer, more intelligent in how we route and manage that last mile logistics to our customers based on the white glove own van fleet. So that's certainly where we are. But just to summarise, certainly the scarcity of resources, lower barriers to entry, and just the third point I'd just like to add is the importance around sustainability and reducing waste is very, very important as far as our considerations when we're considering automation.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. Cheers, John. Yeah, definitely lots of factors to consider when finding a solution. And Andy, please. So you speak to many warehousing operators. So are you seeing a shift to automation?
Yes, we are. I mean, we tend to deal with a variety of different sizes of operators, probably more in the sort of small to medium size operations, sort of in the overall scheme of things. So, there's been automation around for many years in a small way. So we've typically seen customers using sort of simple carousel systems for high density storage and retrieval, and it's really interesting to hear what the other people were saying about the evolution of automation. So, we visit many trade shows, and certainly over the last five or 6 years, there's just been an explosion in the number of suppliers operating all sorts of kind of automated equipment, from follow me robots to high density storage to automatic cleaning robots and all this kind of stuff. So the variety and the accessibility of those is really taking off. So cost of entry is much lower, and the number of options that suit your particular circumstance. So not many of our clients can afford to build a dedicated new warehouse. They are working around their current physical kind of architecture. But some of the technologies, I mean, Andrew used the example of the grab robots, which is operating within existing racking space, for example, just means that you can literally, well, maybe not quite as simple as this, but pick the thing up, install it in the warehouse, and you're kind of up and running with it. So we see a lot more people going down that route, and a lot more options starting up. So yeah, we see a lot more projects starting up within our customer base of all kinds of robotics. So just really reiterating what the other people have talked about.
Yeah, cheers, Andy. I mean, just to quickly summarise from the 4 answers I got, so there is like a wide range of solutions to implement. It is becoming easier to do so, but it's finding the right solution to implement, isn't it? It's the fit for purpose, many stakeholders to please, many factors to consider, and delivering it the right way. Before we just move on to question 2, just want to remind all the attendees that you can ask a question by clicking on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So please do that if you want to ask any question. So move on to question 2, and again to you, Claire, first. I'd imagine that introducing automation must bring a number of challenges. What is the experience of your members in introducing such technology?
Absolutely right, Matt. There are lots of challenges. And as we've got a general election coming up here in the UK, I think I'm going to start with a bit of political commentary. I hope that's not too controversial. I think one of the things that we really need the government to do is help support more local manufacturing and R&D around technology, both hardware and software, to make our supply chain more resilient. So there are some great UK examples. I mean, obviously BCP, but you've also got inventory robots from Dexori, which are built in Oxfordshire. And just this week, I've been to visit Olio International in Coventry, where they make energy absorption equipment, which can be used in automation systems inside warehouses. But these are really the minority. Most of our hardware and software IP is owned overseas. And I think that's a risk that we need to think about, and that the government needs to act on when we're tackling this topic of automation. Some of the other concerns and challenges that we face, third-party logistics providers often have quite short-term contracts with the customers that they operate for. And that can make it difficult to get the return on investment to stack up. If you've only got a contract to run the warehouse for a couple of years, you might not be able to get a payback if you implement automation. So those short-term contracts can be problematic. But I'd like to wrap up my comments on this topic by being a bit more upbeat, because I think that there are a couple of things that seem to be, mitigating in our favour. Adoption of change into any operation is always a bit of a challenge, but a couple of really positive things that I think are improving. Firstly is around digital literacy. So even at entry-level jobs, people who maybe don't have a particularly high standard of education will almost always be digitally literate these days. And I think that's really an advantage when it comes to implementing more automated systems. And then secondly, the range of different kinds of funding models has diversified a bit. So it used to be 20 years ago that if you wanted to implement automation, it would be a massive fixed system that would cost millions of pounds, and you'd have to capitalize it all. That's not necessarily the case these days. You can use asset finance, you can buy robots as a service, you can even try things out before you make a commitment to buy them longer term. So I think digital literacy is really good. Funding options are more varied, and that makes it more accessible. But we do need a bit more government support to make the supply chain for automation, hardware and software a bit more resilient. Yeah, definitely. Cheers, that Claire. Yeah. National and local funding initiatives are always a good way as well. But thank you for that. And Andrew, please. So similarly, what obstacles, if any, are you experiencing within the business through the process of change, and does it stop it in any way?
Yeah, sure. I can probably just give a bit of insight into probably some of the more practical implementation obstacles that we face, and then a bit of insight into terms of how we try and sort of manage against them. I think firstly, like with any complex project, that is a change with how you do customer fulfillment. There's always likely to be some form of new development required from an IT perspective, and that then needs to be quite well thought through as part of any pre-project consideration. Something that we've learned, at James Hall, probably with a few kind of friction points, is just making sure you've got your IT stakeholders and your IT provider as part of any kind of the conversations that you have as part of the pre-project kind of planning stage. I think it's really important, and I'm not looking at this from a technologist point of view, but it's really important that you map out the integration points of the new technology, you clear it and you understand what is required at each point, you understand the flow of data, and the control of data, because that's all essential elements of the project. And at some point they will throw obstacles that need to be navigated. I think just to touch on a bit of a positive though, what is actually helping in this space is more and more of the solution providers themselves, I recognise, are actually starting to adapt their solution to enable a smoother integration to the host warehouse management system whether that's through their own middleware or kind of WMS adapters, and that's helping more and more businesses deploy new automation that maybe in the past could have been held back by their own, legacy nature of their own WMS. I think also understanding kind of your volumetrics is an important part of any design stage. Having access to your product dimensions and updating new lines, it sounds a really simple process, but I often see it being mismanaged, and it is actually fundamental for you to get design accurate. And it's something that at James Hall we've really tried to nail over the last 18 months to make sure that when we work with solution providers, we're confident that the information that we're feeding in is accurate. And I think the final point that I would say is actually not necessarily an obstacle, but definitely something that can make any sort of change kind of harder to manage, is around the usability of the solution. And it's probably also an area that I think more improvement can be made and is definitely coming. When I speak to vendors or product owners, it's something that it's on their high in their development list, and that is the interface with the end user. It needs to be simple. It needs to be engaging. There needs to be an element of gamification. And it needs to make sense. I think naturally, when you've got resistance from the end user and then operational team, that's going to be kind of a big step that you need to kind of work through as a project. And if a vendor's got a clunky, kind of hard to use interface, it's going to undermine a lot of the groundwork that you might put in. I think at James Hall, just a bit of insight, we kind of made sure our teams were kind of clear on our plan, and we kind of asked for their feedback, and we kind of tried to have a well briefed communication update through the start of our journey. And we actually made the point, going slightly off topic, of deploying an autonomous cleaning robot as a very gentle, low friction way of getting the team used to robotics. And as they saw it, then it was picking up a task.
I think we might have lost Andrew temporarily there, but
I think what he was going to say was that the cleaning robot was picking up a task that people didn't really enjoy doing anyway, and so it made them a bit more positive about having robots in the warehouse.
Not necessarily they didn't want to do. So I think what's being provided and what will be the interface.
Exactly. Well, I think too. I don't know.
Sorry, I think
you're back
lose me
now.
then. Claire summarised my point very well, so I can end on that note.
But just to summarise on that, it was but very good point anyway. So I think whoever's associated with that process of change, it's clear that it's got to be clear and concise, isn't it? So what the benefits are, who's delivering it, who's receiving it. It needs to be in place to have a successful application and implementation for it. So thank you for that. And question to you, John. So, what are the key hurdles you find with the introduction of automation within your business operations?
Thank you, Matt. Well, firstly, well done, Claire and Andrew, for showing the importance of teamwork, which is relevant of automation is important in any scenario. So, and I really liked, and thank you, Andrew, for sharing that example of the cleaning robot. The only other thing I'd like to add to Andrew's points is virtual modelling is relatively simple now to do. And going back to Andrew's point around gamification, user engagement, it's a very good way of getting stakeholders involved early in a change process through virtual modelling, which I find very, very useful and valuable as part of a change process. Just building on one point that Claire raised, and I don't particularly want to be party political, I just want to be pragmatic. Obviously, Majestic, we're in the drinks industry, and we really haven't been helped with all of the changes in duty, and there's more changes. We had the duty increases this year, as I'm sure everybody's aware, as consumers, hopefully, of our product. And in the future, next February, we've got more duty changes coming through, which on the face of it don't make any sense whatsoever, and are very difficult for particularly people like us and smaller specialist wine merchants to adapt. Particularly when our world is built on the discovery of our product, it makes it increasingly difficult to execute. Now, probably on the change perspective, the problem that causes is it takes away management attention and doesn't focus on what's really important to our business, which is delivering what the customer wants. So certainly it's not helping. And I completely agree with all the points that Claire mentioned there. But specifically for our industry, as I said, the duty changes are really not helping us. On other points, legacy. We haven't really talked about legacy, but this does give us an opportunity, and it is an opportunity to address legacy. And that's an area that most of us don't particularly particularly in the technology space, often I wouldn't say ignore, but it's not an easy subject to address. But by putting automation in, it does give us the opportunity to address legacy. At the moment, and I am mentioning this, I guess partly because it's BCP, but it's an important investment for us. We're putting a lot of investment in the BCP warehouse management system. And why is that important from a legacy perspective? It gives us a real opportunity to build greater resilience, greater responsiveness, and future-proofing our architecture, which had we have not done the upgrade and not put the investment that we're putting into our warehouse management technology, we wouldn't have been doing. So although legacy on the face of it can appear negative, it actually can be an opportunity for a business, and gives us the opportunity to really address certain areas there. The other point I'd just like to mention, it's facing every consumer brand, is around what we're seeing is increasingly what's happening in our spaces. Our customers are reacting later and later and later to key peaks that we experience in the season that we trade. So typically that's around Easter and Christmas. And what we're finding is that customers are ordering later and later and later. Now, clearly, if you're investing in automation, and it's part of the reason why we're not investing heavily in materials handling equipment, part of the reason is because our peaks are coming much later, much steeper. And that creates problems when you've got a fully automated environment to be able to cope with those peaks. And the last point is partly picked up from Andrew, is around integration. Now, I said earlier that integration is a lot easier with APIs, etc. However, on the other side of it, consumer brands have increasingly more and more touch points with our customers, and they're only increasing over time. So, for instance, food to go is a growing area in the hospitality space. As I said earlier, we deal with the B2B market, is an increasingly growing market for us. As an example, we're seeing that e-commerce continues to grow. We're seeing marketplaces gaining a lot more traction around us, etc. Now, what does that mean from an integration perspective? It means that your stakeholder community grows, and it means that when you are implementing these changes, by definition, you need to be very, very close to your stakeholder management. So there's certainly the points I would raise. But I think overall, and I think the key point that Claire raised, I think, is a prevalent one. When we were looking at this type of change maybe 10 to 15 years ago, most of our user community were very anxious about it and actually got quite stressed about putting in these types of changes. Increasingly, they're more fluent than even we are as a technologist, and often, and that makes the job so much easier, and getting stakeholder buy-in is much easier than it ever was, which is really, really positive. So it makes this whole change process far easier than it has been in the past. So I'd say it's a really positive position for most organizations to be in, particularly when they're consumer facing.
Definitely. Okay, yeah, interesting for that, John. Yeah, thank you very much. And Andy, from a technology perspective, what should people be considering when looking to implement automated solutions?
Yeah, well, I guess we come from it from an integration perspective, really, and that is a one piece of the jigsaw puzzle, really, when you're looking at these kind of projects. But I guess that's the main impact that we see as a WMS provider, really. So there's a number of streams to that, really. We try to be as open as we can with our integration, so that it's relatively straightforward to have the gateways required to support these kind of new technologies. So making sure that you've got that the ability to hook into, whether it's your ERP system or WMS system or other associated systems, is quite important, and getting that all defined and sort of exposed early in your process, really. Level of integration, from our experience, can vary quite drastically. So, it could be as relatively simple as redirecting, picking instructions from a human being to a robotic device, and letting that go off around the warehouse and picking the stock it needs to do, to more kind of sophisticated integration where you may have high density storage, which is being replenished from bulk store elsewhere in the warehouse, and integrating those kind of processes and integrating stock reconciliation. So your core systems are kept in tune with what's actually available in the warehouse, and dealing with any write-offs or damage or whatever there are. So it can vary greatly depending on the level of manual integration work you want to kind of take out, really. I think the other point I'd like to make is around the blending of these kind of technologies. So you may have a mix of various automation devices and human activity. I think particularly where you got seasonality, for example, and you may want to supplement automated picking with human beings, because you just from capacity point of view. So having capability to redirect and manage those kind of workloads, between the human workforce and your automated workforce is kind of coming to the fore as well. So, as WMS providers, and I'm sure others in the market are doing the same thing, we can see the automation growing, and we're busily building facilities and capabilities in our solutions to give that kind of flexibility and make the integration with these kind of systems easier.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Andy. Thank you all, actually. I think really just as a quick summary, it's just, you've all said it, albeit it's easy to make the change and to implement these new technologies, it is still a process of change. So the clearer the plan to satisfy all the stakeholders involved, the better the plan will go to implementation, and obviously the success is as a result of that. So it's just good answers by you all. So thank you for that. So seeing some questions come through from the Q&A session, so I'll work my way through those, so bear with me. So the first one to Andrew, so what kind of return on investment are you seeing from the automation projects you are putting in place?
I'll try and be punchy just in case my a network drops down. Well, to be honest, Matt, I think it varies from project to project, really. I think it's fair to say that, for James Hall, we're still relatively close to the start of our kind of warehouse automation journey. So we're not just looking at a financial ROI, albeit it's an important factor. I think we're also looking to learn, ensure we keep moving forward and, ensure that we're fit for the future. I think when we sort of map out kind of our operation, where we feel automation can benefit us, and then also aligns to our business kind of objectives, we're putting just as much focus on projects that we think can increase space utilization, improve lead times for our customers, make life easier for our teams, whether that's less manual handling, safer work environment, stock management, that sort of thing. At James Hall, we put quite a high price on our people experience and the skill that they bring. So we want any new system to complement our team, rather than kind of work against. I think if we find an opportunity that ticks those boxes, we're probably a bit more likely to take a risk. We recently installed a Randex vertical storage and order tower, as we believed it to be a solution that would allow us to make better use of dead storage space, by removing forklift activity, all the replenishment, that sort of stuff. And actually, during the business case kind of discussion, we actually decided to double the size of the tower that we initially specified. Such was the benefit to us in terms of the reduction in manual replenishment and the utilization of the space and how we handle our slower moving lines. I think, we all know warehouse space can be a bit of a premium. So for us, the use of this dense storage system and the opportunity it gave us to get floor space back was actually a big factor for us to move forward, even if it meant a bit more of an outlay up front compared to what we were initially considering. So I think clearly, the financial ROI, needs to be acceptable for the business. But for us, it's been more than just about the direct kind of labor saving. It's how the automation can support and assist our other kind of strategic objectives that makes the investment worthwhile.
Okay, yeah, cheers, Andrew. Hope that answers the question. So thank you. And we've got another one actually. So Claire, this one's for you. So what kind of percentage of your members are using robotics for storage retrieval processes? And are these purpose-built warehouses?
Well, Matt, we don't actually measure through our own membership exactly what the percentages are. But through the visits that I'm making, I'm visiting 80 warehouses this year. It's our 80th anniversary, and that's one of the ways we're celebrating. And through the visits that I'm making, I would say our percentages are probably aligned with the global percentages that have been reported by the consultants Interact Analysis. So that's a consultancy whose stats we sometimes rely on, and we sometimes get them to speak to our members about automation. They say that in 2018, about 14% of global warehouses were automated, and they expect that to rise to 26% by 2027. So over a 10-year period, pretty much doubling the proportion of warehouses that are automated. There are some particular sectors as well that Interact Analysis highlight, and which I would also agree with from the visits I've made, where we see automation being really highly suitable. One of them is around food and beverage, which of course covers Spar and Majestic. So I think it's not surprising that we're seeing some automation with those BCP customers. But then the other one that they talk about is parcel delivery. And I think in both those cases, there are three main factors, one of which is the sort of regular weights and dimensions. And that builds on the point that Andrew made earlier. You've got to know what the weights and dimensions are, but if they're fairly regular, you know, you haven't got tiny little things and enormous things like they perhaps have in automotive, where you've got little nuts and bolts and then engine parts. That's a bit more difficult to automate. With parcel delivery and with food and beverage, you tend to have regular weights and dimensions. You'll also have economies of scale. And then finally, the level of throughput is predictable. So it might fluctuate, but those fluctuations tend to be something that you can work out in advance roughly what it's going to be like. So I think those are the features that lend themselves to automation, and the percentage rising to just over a quarter in the next couple of years, I think.
Thanks, Claire. Great answer to that. And happy 80-year anniversary as well. And John, one here for you. So it actually says that as John's comments on dealing with peak trading and needing more capacity and flexibility than automated systems allow was very interesting. So how do other operations with high levels of automation deal with this?
Typically supplement it. So have a blended model. I think Andrew or Andy may have referenced this actually, but I think it was Andy referenced it. But typically have a blended model, so it's not 100% automation. So they will allow at those particular peak periods, you can supplement it through manual override, meaning generally warehouse operatives being able to pick and move that stock. So that's typically the way they'll deal with that. Or obviously you can supplement that through third parties. Yeah, so if at any particular point in time you could get excess capacity through additional third party space, etc., and operations. But that typically is the model, is through blending. Yeah.
Okay.
Just one other quick.
Sorry,
go
I
ahead.
Just interject on that?
Yeah, of course,
sorry,
yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, John.
No, of course not.
I was just thinking about an iForce warehouse I recently visited, where they'd implemented an Exotech system, which is kind of like a goods to person sort of dense storage system. And what they described was that system was really, really easy to use. And because it was so easy to use, when they saw their peaks in volume, they would take on agency staff and, you know, to induct agency staff into their old manual processes would be at least a couple of weeks training, whereas the training on this automated system was much shorter, a matter of hours, and people could be picking at a rate that was commensurate with somebody who was much more experienced. So being able to respond to those peaks by using agency labour was actually supported through the type of automation that they'd adopted. Maybe it doesn't work with all forms, but I thought that might be worth adding.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Claire, and thanks, John, as well. Previously,
yeah, just one other quick point, Matt, I wanted to raise, and Andy raised this, and it just as Andy was talking at the end of our previous conversation, one point that we need to be conscious of a lot with this automated technologies is security, particularly around data security, and also backbone. When you're considering your sites and you are putting this automation in there, just make sure you've got the right infrastructure supported in place, and don't forget that, because that can be obviously critical, particularly around scalability, and obviously stability. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, just wanted to interject and make those couple of points.
Yeah, no, good point. Thanks, John. So as I can see, our time is almost over, and I know a lot of our attendees have got busy schedules to attend to. So I just want to say a big thank you to our four members on our panel. So thank you for your time and great responses that you've given to the questions and other questions we've had for the Q&A session. For the attendees, remember, obviously, our email addresses are on our background. So if you have any other questions to ask, then please do, or approach me directly at BCP, and I can forward these on to the respective member as well. So really just a big thank you for everybody that's attended and from the panel. Hope you have a good rest of the day and week. The sun's meant to be coming out. Trying to get over a bit of man flu at the moment, so hopefully I can appreciate it at the weekend if it stays clear and dry, but things are always likely to change. But thank you again and have a good day.
Cheers, Matt. Cheers, everyone.